Good gardening, people. Today is April the 15th. Normally that's tax day, but they've moved that on down the road because of the COVID. It's still, however, what we call crabgrass day. Those of you out there who don't want crabgrass in your yard, from today and for the next 2 weeks, you can put down a pre-emergent that will kill the crabgrass as it's germinating and save you a lot of spraying trouble later in the summer. The product I recommend is called Dimension for crabgrass. And if you put it down, it will block the crabgrass for the entire season. But that assumes, of course, you get it down right now or immediately thereafter. Once the crabgrass is germinated and has grown a little bit, it won't work anymore. So run down to your nursery, ask for a bag of Dimension. It's a bit pricey. It only covers about 1,500 square feet, but if you don't want to fight crabgrass, it's the best product. It's too late to put down gallery or barrier, which are broadleaf weed preventatives. The time to put those down is in late fall or very early spring. So if you're trying to put down and certainly preen I wouldn't even bother with. It's not that good a product. But barrier or gallery, if put down at the proper time, at the end of summer till first frost or first thing in the spring, will block all the weed seed in your yard in the broadleaf weed families. Well, today we're not going to be talking about weeds. We're going to be talking about bugs, because the bug season has just begun. Title of this episode is Bugs, Slugs, and Creepy Crawly Thugs. But before I get on and start talking about all the details there, I want to clarify something about my attitude toward farming in general. This pertains to bugs, this pertains to weeds, this pertains to the plants we pick. They are all part of a natural cycle that balances, acting as predator and prey, weeding out the weak plants for a healthier ecosystem. We have a darn fool notion that we should create a monoculture of plants like lawns, which are a testament to our vanities, and what we are promoting is not well-working part of a food cycle. A true organic gardener would not garden at all. They would gather from the forest and the fields native food stocks, or promote those same plants in their yards, regardless that the lawn that they were growing it in would look more like a field. And our traditional trees that we love, and shrubs and flowers and veggies, would all be missing from the yard. Instead, local plants would be there, which need little or no care from us. Lawns in particular are an abomination to nature. Unless your lawn looks like a weed patch with very little imported grass, technically speaking, you are only a semi-organic gardener at best. It's feel-goodism, not true ecology. We have determined as a culture this is not a reasonable compromise to nature, and we like our uniformity, comforts, exotic plants, which are more in a European tradition. Speaking from experience, though, and having a field surrounding my yard, to just let it run wild gives you nothing but mosquitoes and ticks. There is a good reason to go the route of managing your property. It's just not natural, okay? Natural would be to put up with the ticks and the mosquitoes. So barring that extreme, I like to mow my field of its native grasses, and I spray for ticks and mosquitoes. It's not organic, but it's also not a high-tech monoculture either. I am also not ready to move back to Africa to the veldt, which is where our ancestors evolved, and we were in harmony with that environment. But all things in moderation. You can use high-tech, even eco-friendly methods to create a beautiful, safe living space. That's what this class is about. It is those who take it to an extreme that are the main offenders, and pollutions and extinctions. But nature is tough. It was here billions of years before us and will likely exist a billion or so after us. You can knock nature down a peg or two, as mankind has done in the last 20,000 years, but it will always bounce back with a vengeance. Pity not the poor creatures of the forest. They are not the ones who stand to lose most by our being poor shepherds of our lands. Our extinction is far more guaranteed than theirs. There's also another argument I adhere to. Man came from nature. Nature selected us by honing our brains and our perceptions as a survival strategy. It turned out to work very effectively, and like any uber competitor, has resulted in a dominance of our species within its environment. Examples of uber species that, like us, thrive due to evolutionary success stories are the cockroach, the rat, dog and cat, the mosquito, the dandelion, the sparrow. There are many others with superior survival tools that thrive while others are in decline. We are therefore part of nature, and anything we do is therefore natural. That would include industrialization, modern cities, as well as anything else we do that seems to make the world diminish before us. Man equals nature. His pollution is its own method of nature weeding us out. We look at the harm we do as abhorrent to the way of the natural life on Earth, but in fact, whenever there's a uber species that gets out of hand, nature's method of getting rid of it is to give it enough rope to hang itself. So that's where we are in that. We're not gunning for nature, nature is gunning for us. So keep that in mind. The longer you can do things in moderation, the longer humanity will be here on the planet. Bugs too are uber survivors, and you will immediately realize this when you go to war against them. Chances are, using every modern tool at your disposal, in the end, you will be sitting on top of they will be sitting on top of your plants, laughing at your pathetic efforts to eradicate them. We are now going to discuss a 500 million year old battle between the descendants of fish and the descendants of arthropods. In essence, our ancestors and bugs' ancestors. 500 million years ago, the first fish appeared on the planet. The arthropods were already here, fairly well established, but the fish, instead of having an exoskeleton like these guys, developed an internal skeleton. First, they didn't have any fins. They just were kind of wormy looking things that slithered around. But slowly, they developed, in some cases, armor plating. It still had an internal bone structure, different than the arthropods, which always had an exoskeleton. Sometime around 500 million years ago, the cephalopus decided it was too tough going there in the ocean all the time. So they started swimming upstream to lay their eggs and then would return to the ocean again. Well, the ancestor to the Euphoterid, excuse my pronunciation, was called the Proto-Scorpion. This was a scorpion that was about 3 feet long, had a stinger and a tail. It would look pretty much like the scorpions we have today, with the exception of the fact that they breathed water. Well, they followed up on the land excursions along the beach. They'd find a stream where cephalopus would be swimming and would wait there in ambush and jump them. That's why the scorpions became the first land animals. They got used to climbing up out of the water to capture our ancestors. And our ancestors eventually decided that competition was too tough in the seas, so they moved on to land as well. So going ahead, million years, bring it back up a little bit so you can see the next portion here. we had the Carboniferous period. So 250 million years ago was the Carboniferous period. Our ancestors, which eventually turned into mammals and dinosaurs, and then eventually birds, was about 1.5 foot long lizard called Mesotheliate. Mesotheliate had some pretty nasty competition from the descendants of the Arthropods. Here we have the Megara Chain, which was a spider the size of a cat that would lived in the ground in tunnels and had all these runner threads running out of it. And if anything tripped the thread, he'd run out, attack it, and suck all its blood. Certainly he would have enjoyed a meal of this fellow here. We also had Arthropods, which was a 8-foot long centipede, which would eat pretty much anything that was smaller than it, which is everything. How many 8-foot long bugs have you ever seen? But the premier predator of the day was Megara, which was a dragonfly the size of an eagle. So if you weren't eaten by the spiders the size of cats or the centipedes that were 8 feet long, you'd get eaten by the giant flying dragonflies. So our ancestors certainly had a lot harder problem with bugs than we do today. Then here on the bottom we have today, us versus hordes of insects. There are now millions and millions of species of bugs out there, all very specialized, all very uber survivors, able to adapt very quickly to chemicals compared to us. And now we have to go on to how to deal with these things, the nature of fighting them in our gardens and in our homes. So we have developed many chemicals and even some natural methods of fighting off insects. If we didn't, we would quickly starve to death because there's no way to grow farms on an industrial scale to feed 6 billion people on this planet without chemicals. I've had this discussion with a lot of organic farmers. Yes, it's wonderful on a small scale. You can eat very good food that way, but to feed the world, we have to use industrial. The most famous chemical that has long been given a bad name is DDT. We all know it from Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, which came out in, I guess, the 1950s or early 60s, which totally condemned DDT as being a chemical that was filtering into all of our aspects of the food chain, killing off birds and poisoning the human race as well. Well, in the late 60s, it was banned. Then after it was banned, more studies were done on it, other than the ones Rachel had based her book on, and discovered that largely it was not doing near the amount of damage that was given to it in reputation. But too late, it had already been given a bad reputation, and we had started an ecological movement, and so it remains banned to this day. It is practically the only chemical on the planet that will stop the malaria mosquito. So every person who's died of malaria since the late 60s when this was banned may have been saved by the use of DDT. Now, does it kill other things? Yes, it kills everything really, really well in the insect world. And it probably does some collateral damage to wildlife as well. In fact, there is a tendency in our country, if a chemical works really well, they investigate it thoroughly and then ban it. So we continue to get weaker and weaker chemicals that are on the market for bugs that are evolving stronger and stronger resistance to the ones that we have. So that is kind of a problem there. Eventually, we're going to have tied our hands, and the bugs will take advantage of that, and we will have massive food shortages, and probably war is over that. It's something that we have to figure out a way around. There are still some chemicals that I recommend because they're both ecologically friendly and fairly effective, but the best ones that I remember from the past, like MSMA, have been banned for whatever reason. They've been determined to either cause cancer or have some kind of poison in them that's dangerous if taken in large doses. But if in trace amounts, they probably would do very little harm. But we react kind of with a knee-jerk reaction to chemicals. Chemical is now a bad word in our culture. And because of that, I worry about the future. Any rate, let me find you a list of some chemicals that are good for fighting bugs, starting with what I would call the lightweights, which are organic insect resisting chemicals. They don't kill the bug, but they deter him. My favorite there is a mixture of tobacco, hot pepper, and chrysanthemum, all ground up into a tea. If you add some wilt-proof to it, it'll stick it to the plant better. And this will cause the insects to pass that plant over unless they're really hungry. It's not 100% effective. For example, tobacco, I've seen hornworm eat the heck out of it, even though most bugs don't like it. Same with aphids, they'll attack tobacco. And there are bugs that'll eat hot peppers too. It's not a universally disliked chemical. Chrysanthemum, on the other hand, you don't find too many bugs on chrysanthemums. Why? Because the chemical in it, pyrethrum, is poisonous to cold-blooded animals. It will, if ingested, kill most insects, and unfortunately also cold-blooded animals like fish. So you don't want pyrethrum getting out of your garden and into the water supply, because then you'll have a fish kill. And that is an organic natural chemical. But that combination, tobacco, hot pepper, chrysanthemum, and a tea, is a good organic pest control. Does not really stop the insects, but it sure discourages them. Okay. I made up a list of other chemicals that are not as friendly as that actually do kill off insects. The other organic that is very popular is called neem oil. It's an extraction from the neem tree, and it works on the digestive system of the insects as they feed. Unfortunately, it takes so long to kill the bug that it continues to feed quite a while after it's ingested the neem oil, and therefore is only partially effective as an insect retardant. It works too slowly, so I give it about a 5 out of 10. Another one that's popular with organic gardeners is called Diatomaceous Earth. And what it is little tiny fossil algae pieces that are like little shards of broken glass on a microscopic level. And so if you put this on your plants or on the dirt around the plants, then bugs crawl through them, they cut themselves, and then they slowly bleed to death. Unfortunately, it doesn't work on bugs that have an exoskeleton, so it only works on the larvae. So if you got worms or grubs or something like that, it will have an effect on them, but it doesn't do a thing for adult bugs. That one I give about a 3 out of 10. These are organic methods. One other organic method is called BT, or Bacillus thuringiensis, which is a microbe that eventually kills the bug when ingested. It's kind of germ warfare against the bugs. Again, it's kind of slow, and by the time it works, you'll kill the bugs, but you won't have much crop left. So I give it about a 4 out of a 10. Then we get into pyrethrum, which is the chemical that comes out of chrysanthemums. That one I consider to be the most effective of the organics. The danger of it is, of course, it also kills fish. But if you spray it onto the plant and use a sticking agent, it will protect against any insects that are eating into that plant, with a couple of exceptions like scale and some of the tougher bugs. It's also non-toxic to any warm-blooded animals, so you can put it on your vegetables safely. And we've created a whole slew of industrial chemicals based on pyrethrins that are also non-toxic to warm-blooded animals. Because of this, I give the pyrethrum family a 7 out of 10. It's organically in nature. It's non-toxic to warm-blooded animals, but you do have to watch your control on it or it will get out of hand in the rivers. Okay, the next chemical that's up in strength is called Rotenone. This chemical is toxic to both warm and cold-blooded creatures, however, but especially to cold-blooded ones, and it also kills fish very easily. It's organic, though. I give it a 6 out of 10. Then probably the best of the organics, which is only semi-organic because it's been industrialized, is called spinosad. And it's also based on a bacterium. It's another germ warfare, and it works pretty well. It also kills pretty fast. So of my organics, that's probably my favorite, giving it a 7.5 out of 10 for effectiveness. It's the one I fall back on when I am trying to fight off bugs in my garden and I don't want something that's toxic to human beings. Okay, the next form of attack is against insects or glue traps. If you have a lot of flying insects that move around the garden, you can stick up strips of glue and they stupidly attach themselves and they won't be eating your plants anymore. They're stuck. However, it also kills friendly insects. It's non-selective. The bees will stick to it just as well as the bad bugs. Then there are hormone traps. These only work against certain kinds of beetles, like the Japanese beetle. In fact, they're exclusive to Japanese beetles because they take the Japanese beetle mating hormone and put it in the trap. Basically, the hormone is calling to the beetle saying, "Hey, sailor, new in town," and the beetle enters the trap and then starves to death. If you put it close to the target where the beetles are hanging out, it's very effective. I'd give it a 9 out of 10 for that. But if you get it a little bit too far from the target plant where all the beetles are hanging out, it's almost completely ineffective. So you have to be clever enough to figure out where the beetles want to hang out for you to use hormone traps. So going on to the inorganics, we have Preventatives, which is, again, a synthetic version of the chrysanthemum flower. Deltamethrin, which is that same chemical concentrated 5 times. And then cypermethrin, which is that same chemical concentrated 10 times. By the time you get to deltamethrins and cypermethrins, so you cross the barrier where it's no longer non-toxic to all warm-blooded animals. You've kind of reached into the point where, yeah, it's a little bit toxic to mammals as well as to insects. But if I'm having trouble with, say, spiders or roaches coming into my house, the deltamethrin and the cypermethrin are my first choice. You spray them along the door frames and along the window frames and under all of the refrigerators and stoves and things. And if they touch it, they're dead. It also works quite well on plants. It doesn't absorb into the plant, but it will kill whatever touches the outside of the plant. If you don't want to kill bees, though, better stick with the permethrin and don't spray it in the flowers. Just spray it on the plant. Then the bees will be okay. It's, again, does not penetrate into the plant tissue, so it's washable and will not cause you to have to eat the chemical later on. If it was permethrin anyway, it wouldn't hurt you. It only hurts you if you're cold-blooded. 7, that's a very effective chemical, but it's too effective. It tends to wash off easily and wind up in the soil. The first thing it does is it kills off all of your earthworms. And it keeps on going into the environment and kills and kills and kills until it's totally diluted. So for effectiveness, I give it a 10, but for ecology, I give it a 0. So I never use 7, even though it's probably one of the better chemicals to kill off bad bugs. It's also non-selective. It kills the bees as well if they touch it. Now we get into the systemic. Systemic means instead of it being topical and sitting on top of the plant, not entering the tissue, it goes into the plant tissue. We usually pour systemics into the roots and then wait a month. And then after a month's time, it circulates all through the plant. And any insect that tries to eat that plant is going to die. Imidacloprid is my favorite one of those. I use it on my roses. I use it on any other flowers in the garden, but I don't tend to use it on anything I'm planning to eat. If you do want to eat a plant and use imidacloprid on it, you have to let the plant sit for about 3 months without spraying it till all of it's out of its system again, or else you are ingesting a toxin. So imidacloprid is great for trees, shrubs, and flowers. Not so good for vegetables, but it is very effective. Then an older chemical that you can't hardly find anymore is malathion. It has a very nasty smell. Worked great on spider mites though, and I don't think you can find it anymore. I haven't seen it on the shelf in years. I give it a 7 out of 10. Other chemicals that are gone are diazinon, which was very effective, but also determined to be biologically dangerous. And the best one and only chemical that will kill scale is safari. Those are my list of chemicals that I approve or disapprove of with an explanation. And that pretty much covers the base on those. We'll continue talking about insects next time because they're just starting. We'll go over some of the really bad ones and the sort of bad ones. But good gardening, folks. We'll see you next time, and keep the faith.